Genres are a funny little concept, aren't they? In theory, they have a simple definition that's easy to understand, but in practice, some may feel confined. So that's a Linda Martell quote from the beginning of Beyonce and Shaboozie's song Spaghetti on Cowboy Carter. Linda Martell was a Black country artist in, I think, the 1970s, so she's quite old at this point, but they had her collaborate on this to speak about genre. And I think that's so interesting because genre blending is happening in music, it's happening in literature, it's happening in film. Just kind of across the board, people are interested in it. And they are a funny little concept because nobody wants to be pigeonholed. Like, don't you want to think that your literary character can also step into a wormhole?
Welcome to Speculative Sandbox, your audio playground for creative storytellers. My name is Vicky Lon, and in each episode, I and a guest will unpack a trope with an eye for world building, character development, or narrative structures. You can also join the conversation on TikTok and Instagram. For those times when the real world just doesn't cut it, let's get lost in a fictional one. So, Leslie, I see that we are kind of twinning today. We're both wearing very cute shirts with a little bit of a turtleneck. Is this your literary author look?
It is my literary author look. I just got this at a clothing swap and then I got the same one in maroon.
Ooh, I
So
love
I'm
it.
I'm really into clothing swaps.
For people who are not listening to us on YouTube or Spotify, come over to YouTube and Spotify. You can check out how we are twinning. I feel like I am also looking very literary. I do not write literary, but I feel very literary today, which is perfect for our conversation. So, Leslie, I'm so happy to have you on the podcast again. You were, if I remember correctly, maybe my second guest ever on Speculative Sandbox, and we talked about immortality. Do you remember that?
I completely remember that. That was my very first podcast that I've ever recorded, and this is my third. So
Ooh.
two of my podcast experiences have been with you.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I'm so glad that you came back on. A funny story was I was exploring sound bites back then and putting them on TikTok. And that was, during the pandemic and everyone was on TikTok. And I'll always remember our conversation about like what we would fictionally workshop in the real world to become immortal. And I talked about a really old creosote bush. Do you remember that? And I talked about taking the needles and leaves and creating a tea and drink that and you can become immortal because that thing is the oldest thing on the planet. And boy, did that video find the wrong side of TikTok who did not know, understand the context of fictional workshopping. And the amount of people who thought I was an idiot for wanting to drink the tea leaves of a bush that could possibly kill me. People were very concerned or just really mad at me. So that's TikTok for you. We'll talk a little bit about promoting and
Oh my
social media
God.
later, but yeah, that was a funny story.
Oh my God. That's so funny because we're not scientists.
No.
We're like literally the people who are creating these ideas,
Yes.
whether or not they're plausible in any way, like TBD.
Yes. And we got to give ourselves credit as these as speculative writers because as I have discussed in other episodes, the science community is very influenced by the fictional world and the tech world too. So, what
Yeah.
we may dream up may become a reality.
Well, last year, because it was July of 2025, I tried to reread The Parable of the Sower and I had to stop. I was just
Oh,
like, oh, that was 2024. Sorry. My last year, because I just moved, it's almost like it didn't exist, but 2024, I tried to read it and I was like, oh, yeah, it starts in July of 2024. And it was like, another astronaut has died on Mars. And I was just like, I don't know if I can read this.
yeah.
I like,
No, it's
it had
tough.
been several years. Yeah, she was right on the money.
Yes. There's a movie, what is it? Is it Idiosyncrasy? Came out
Oh,
in the 90s. I
are,
think
are
that's
you are you talking about Idiocracy?
Thank you. Idiocracy. Yes, I hadn't actually seen that movie when it first came out, and I watched it within the last year, and I was shocked at how I'm like, wait a minute, this was made during a time where none of this was actually happening in real life. It's just a mockery of the future. And I was just like
Uh-huh.
flabbergasted at how like, shoot, I feel like they've really clocked us in the future for what the world is like. It was
Like
really
everybody
funny.
lives inside a Costco and wears Crocs.
Yeah.
No shade to Costco or Crocs,
No,
by
I
the
wear
way.
Crocs. Yeah.
Costco, yeah.
Okay, so I'm supposed to have an icebreaker to start off, but that was kind of an icebreaker. But I will ask this question of you because you are a ghostwriter, and that's what you do in addition to your writing. So I wanted to ask you this, a little technical, writing technical question. How do you adapt to different narrative voices or genres depending on the needs of your client?
Okay, so my blanket answer for this is I really, 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 really focus on the reader. And that's something that I talk about with my clients from day one. Is who is this book for? Um, you can you can write for someone who's overly technical, but they want to tell their book or they want to tell their story or their information for, let's say, a 101 group. Um, so we're not using jargon and stuff. We're saying like how we would say it to a teenager or someone who has no prior experience. I ask them questions too, like, do you want me to use curse words? Is that okay? And usually they are very fine with it, depending on their audience. So I tend to be really audience focused when I tailor for voice and tone because a lot of the time, people who want a ghostwriter don't want to sound like themselves. That's actually the problem. They're like,
Okay.
I have a lot of people who say, hey, I'm really dry when I write. And I'm also really dry when I talk. Can you make me sound more personable? And so then again, I'm thinking from the reader who in literary fiction or speculative fiction, any type of fiction, you might have heard called the ear of the story, like who is listening, who's receiving. And yeah, that really helps me. I feel like as soon as I drop into our ideal reader, it's just kind of not a problem. I will say that everything that I've written also kind of sounds like me
Okay.
because my brain is the computer that it's
Yeah.
going through. But if Chat GPT has its tells, then Leslie has her tells too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll always remember, so, and we've talked about this in the last episode we were in together. You've edited my books and did a great job. And one of the things I always loved was you were not afraid to tell me, Vicky, this is a much bigger deal than you're giving. I think you should give this character more credit. They should say a bigger curse word. I remember you saying that. Like, I think that this expletive that you used, maybe use this other more severe expletive. And I'm like, yes, I thought that was awesome. But
That sounds about right.
yeah, yeah. So we are here to talk about a book of yours that's coming out in May, Salome, and I just got your hardcover in the mail actually, so I'm gonna lift it
Oh,
here.
I haven't seen it yet.
Really? Oh my gosh, look at it.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Wow, look how shiny.
I'm
Look how
trying to like
shiny that.
I,
Yeah.
I was impressed by how shiny it was. So there's the spine. Trying to like work with the blur background here, but beautiful. It's beautiful. So
The
this
color
is
scheme you chose looks really good with
oh
it
my
too.
gosh, that was a total coincidence. Cool, cool, cool. Okay, so this is
Wow.
coming out May 19th. So how about you share with our listeners your book and the writing process behind it?
Oh my gosh.
Mhm.
So still, I mean, even my book's coming out in less than a month, and I still balk at the question of like, what's your book about? And then I immediately assess the person who's asking and decide, okay, do they want to hear about the bumbling American in France? Do they want to hear about the demisexual to bisexual love story? Do they want to hear about the techno fascists taking over the world? Um, what do they want to hear about? So I just gave some things away, but it's so the genesis of this book was I just wanted to write a novel. Never written a novel from chapter one to finish. I had written a bunch of starts of novels, but never all the way through. And I love an assignment. And so I just started writing and I really missed France. I hadn't been back to France in several years. And I just kind of got this idea for an American who loves France too much. And it was kind of a way I could joke on myself a little bit and have her idealize and the French, and then kind of find out that I mean, and I love France personally, but every French person I talked to was just like, "Oh, it's awful, it's terrible," and I kind of got this idea of someone going and spending time in a place that's not Paris, it's not a touristy place, and then discovering some similarities to the United States. They're both big uh, colonizers and
Mhm.
kind of seeing that, France as rose colored glasses, how she sees it, um, while potentially a better fit for her later in her life is not necessarily just like the best place on the planet, and without its faults. And so I kind of just wanted to play around with that. Um, Also playing around with the idea that we're going to be a completely different person in a different place. I'm going to be my travel self wherever I land. I won't have to work. I won't have to XYZ in your everyday life, and just how that's not true. And so that's kind of why I kind of put these two women together and just kind of started to see what the alchemy was there. And I completely discovery wrote this. I didn't have an outline. I just had this idea of like, American Francophile goes to France, has her ass handed to her, go. What happens?
Well, and very romantic and alluring and intriguing from the start. I read this a couple months ago and really enjoyed it. And when you talk about
Thank
what
you.
would the listener or what would the person asking the question be curious about, I love that you. And the topic of this episode being, I love that you blended different things together because in one way, I can just immerse in the cultural aspect of the story and like the heart and soul, like human relations of the story. But then you pull into some other things. You've got a little bit of like suspense and thriller and mystery. And so, we'll go into this a little bit more, but how was that as an experience for you to write?
Really fun. Um, Again, I didn't really know where I was going to start, and so I just wrote as it came to me. And when I was in college, I had quite a bit of sleep paralysis.
Hmm.
And so let me back up for just a second and say I named this character Salome before I looked into the biblical story of Salome and then all of the art that came off of that. And so once I had decided on the name, I was like, oh my God, like what a rich amount of existing material I can pull from. And so I did pull from the biblical story of Salome, the story by Oscar Wilde, a play, um, that was originally written in French. And we'll talk more about this, I'm sure, in a little while. And then I pulled from a painting called The Nightmare, where there's a sleep paralysis demon
Mm.
sitting on a woman's
Yeah.
sleeping body, and there's a horse in that. And I just thought that was so interesting because horses evidently can suffer from sleep paralysis. I didn't know.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
And yeah. And then I also pulled from a classic French play called La Pie Voleuse, which is the thieving magpie. And I can tell you a little bit more about like where I pulled these elements into the story. Um, but to that, I would write the sleep paralysis scenes kind of get really trippy. And then I had to pull together, like, well, why is it so trippy? Why did I choose to do that? And that's why it took me 20 drafts to write this book. But
Wow.
I didn't actually, yeah, I didn't actually, I mean, honestly, I never thought it would be published. I wrote this entire book unagented. I didn't have my MFA yet. I just wrote it like for a first novel. And then I just kept at it and I kept at it and I kept at it and I kept at it. And then eventually, I guess I got it to a place where it was worthy of the cover you just showed me.
No, that's amazing. And when you tell me 20 drafts, like I'll always remember when on my first project when you told me this all the steps that we were going to go through together and then you go and that'll be your draft one. And I was like, "Oh." So, that gives me perspective and I feel like I understand like what you went through like to be able to distinguish those drafts. So,
Yes.
I want to know there. I have a list of things that I wanted to kind of list off as far as what you said would appeal to different people and their likes. But I think I want to move that to the end as a rapid fire because what I would like to do is
Okay.
talk about the genre blend since we got started with the genre blending. So we talked about how you kind of blended a lot of things together, and I've spoken from the reader's perspective, like the very fun ride that you get to go on throughout this book. So let's define genre blending. What is genre blending, and how do you find it represented in publishing right now?
Well, genre blending, and sometimes they say genre bending. I think
Hmm.
they're the same thing. It's just when you take different elements from what we might call more genre fiction, which is horror, romance, what are other genres? Westerns,
Hmm.
anything that's not just literary fiction, and you pull them into a more literary, and I'm saying that, but you could also blend sci-fi and romance, or you could
Hmm.
blend all sorts of different things. You're just taking certain elements of different genres and putting it together.
I really, it's interesting is I wasn't much of a literary reader for the longest time. I liked my genre fiction, my
Hmm.
adventure, my horror. But recently, and I don't know how recent this is, I've been seeing that genre blending occurring in the literary world. It's like a sprinkle, like there's a very
Hmm.
literary plot or character arc, but there's a sprinkle of the supernatural on top of it
Yeah.
that makes it
Okay.
interesting and alluring. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, Booker Prize shortlisted. She won, didn't she? Or maybe not.
Oh, I don't know. Audition
We
by
can cut that out if she didn't win.
okay.
Audition by Katie Kitamura. It
Mhm.
is so good. I loved this. And it's very literary, but she adds a bit of genre blending in that about halfway through there's a midpoint, and then the story continues, but so many of the established plot points are different, and it's just not even mentioned.
Ooh,
Um,
interesting.
yeah, she's incredible. I mean, this is such a thin, sparse book, and she does so much in it. It was just a masterclass, and it does have. I'm not going to spoil anything, but I do feel like there's a bit of genre blending in it, in that she just pauses the story, continues the story, but all of these elements are different and with no explanation.
Ooh.
Um,
Do you feel that literary, so okay, I'll speak to my experience a little bit getting through the publishing route. Um, I remember hearing from a lot of agents back in 2020, I think it was. I learned that genre blending, genre bending was really attractive. It was like, we want to see how you guys play with genre. I'm like, heck yeah. So then I wrote
mhm,
a genre mashup of stuff. And then once I got my agent, then it became a really interesting discussion on the existing conditions of publishing and the categorizations that they need to file you away in so they can figure out formula wise what is your marketing potential for success, which does not, at
right,
least did not feel very as accommodating or adapted to the genre blending idea because how does that reflect in their formulas? Um, so it was interesting to go from we want your genre bending to wait, we're a little scared of how you did do this genre bending. So
right.
what are your thoughts on that?
I have a similar experience in that, I mean, I told you that when I'm ghostwriting, I think a lot about the reader. I didn't think about the reader at all when I was writing this because I didn't think I was going to have one, frankly. So I thought about me as the reader, like what would Leslie like to happen here? Um, and Leslie actually likes a lot of plot. I like beautiful prose. I like literary writing, but can we have a plot? That's kind of how I feel. And so I just wanted something to happen. I wanted the next scene. I wanted the next conflict, the next, you know, loop to be thrown through. Um, and so I just wasn't really thinking about readers. And then when my genre blending novel has now come out, I'm finding that people either really respond to the first half, which is the more rooted in reality half, or they really respond to the second half, which is the more, we'll call it speculative. And I'm that's kind of difficult for me to reconcile, to say like, how do I encourage the reader who's going to like the second half to like hold on and wait till it gets there, and then how do I encourage the person who really liked the kind of slow burn of the first half to believe the plausible deniability of the second half. And then I think there's going to be somebody who just it squarely meets and they're just like, wow, that was fun.
Yeah, I,
Not
I,
really
I,
sure.
I mean, I could say I did not know what to expect. I could not predict, and that's what I think I value a lot in a reading experience,
Hmm.
especially as a writer. When you've gotten so used to, well, you know the craft, and you become very intimate with it. You can pick up a book, and you can kind of start predicting things. What I love is a book that takes me on an unpredictable ride. So in a way, I feel like genre blending can serve that a little bit because you're not quite
It
sure where it's going to
can.
take you.
That's a very good point. And also, I've been shocked, like, as the marketing team has gotten a hold of it and they've really put it through their lens of who is this for. I'm hearing I'm hearing the book put in terms of something I never thought about, like a gothic tinged fever dream. I could never
Ooh.
write that. Like hands down to these marketing people that they can distill something into words that are like that accurate and specific. But I would never come up with that myself. And no, I didn't say like, you know what I'm going to write today is a gothic tinged fever dream. I was just, I pantsed so hard on this novel. Um, but it is interesting to see people are calling it gothic. They're calling it a thriller. They're calling it horror adjacent. I never thought it would be that.
Yeah, no, that's got to be fun, I think, to kind of get a perspective now on how others view you. And
Hmm.
the joke of the English class where people are like, let's unpack the meaning of the yellow wallpaper, and someone thinks it could just be yellow. Like they do not think
That's
twice.
me. Yes. So I had a professor that I loved, Chris Batchelder, in my MFA program, and he was always like, keep your references low. The literary critics are the ones who are going to like try to create all this.
Oh,
What's the word I'm looking for? So yeah, I'm
analogies,
like, they are going to create
literary
these.
references,
Yes, they're gonna imbue meaning into these choices of like,
mhm.
the lavender cab in The Great Gatsby and all that. Which when I read Gatsby, I actually think that I'm a good editor because I'm not a good reader. Like I'm just like I don't understand why she did that, or like I don't understand this
No, I
reference,
do like that
and
when you
like
do that.
and help people just get like really clear to serve that reader that isn't, doesn't have like a literary background or doesn't have a degree in English literature or something. So, yeah.
So this book is also considered, and one thing that they talk about is it's a retelling or a reimagining. So,
Yeah.
and the quote specifically is a modern reclamation of the original femme fatale whose story until now has been almost exclusively told by men. Salome is a tantalizing feminist tale exploring power, loyalty, connection, and the measures we'll take to harness our deepest desires. So you mentioned Salome is a biblical story. Can you share with us that story?
Yeah. So you've probably seen, if you've ever been into a museum with art, you've seen an image of a teenage girl with a silver platter and John the Baptist, or a head on it. So it's John the Baptist's head. And that teenager is Salome. And the story goes that John the Baptist was being held as a political prisoner in King Herod's court. King Herod's wife is Herodias, and she was married to the former king. I can't remember what his name was, RIP. He's dead. And then his brother, Herod, is the king and married his former sister-in-law. The daughter, Salome, is tantalizing. She's a teenager. It's gross. But it was like, you know, John the Baptist was alive times. We
Yes,
can
these
still
stories are
criticize
written
it.
by men. Yeah.
Every story is primarily told by men,
Hmm.
you know? So as I started looking into this and I read the story about um, Salome falls in love with the voice of John the Baptist that she hears. He's being held prisoner at the bottom of a cistern. I'm bringing in the Oscar Wilde story here because in the Bible it's really short and it doesn't actually use the word Salome.
Okay.
They're not 100% sure where that name came from. It was additional texts that were Bible or Torah adjacent, and they like found the name Salome somewhere in there. So it's not in the Bible, but she fell in love with the voice. She starts to lust after him. Then there's a big banquet dinner, and Herod really wants her to dance for him, and she's like, "Ew, you're a perv, no." And then she's also continuing to lust after John the Baptist, like, let me kiss your lips, let me touch your face, you're the most beautiful I've ever seen. She has him brought up from the cistern and he refuses her. And her mother suggests, why don't, sorry, Herod says, if you dance for me, I'll give you anything you want. And her mother says, well, why don't you ask for John the Baptist's head on a plate? Because she knows that Herod really doesn't want him to die
Wow.
because he
Okay.
holds as a political power, he or a political prisoner, he has like he has leverage by having John the Baptist as a prisoner.
But isn't that interesting for
And
Salome, who's lusting after John, to ask for his death?
Yeah, well, she's been spurned because he said no. So
Okay.
this doesn't this sound so familiar to you as a woman? You want somebody, they say no, so you kill them?
Mm, yeah.
No, women don't usually do that. Honestly, usually that's a story that
I was gonna
the
say,
man had, you know?
yeah,
Yeah.
there's some
So
projection
okay, so
here.
this exactly. So this isn't adding up to me. So Salome dances the sexy dance, the dance of the seven veils. And it's for her creepy stepfather who's so disgusted by her after she, okay, so they cut off John the Baptist's head, give it to her, silver platter. There's the image. She kisses the head,
Wow.
she kisses his lips. Herod is so disgusted by this that he orders Salome murdered, and then the lights go down and she's killed off stage, usually. So that was such a quick rundown. Like there's scholars who have studied this story in such depth. I looked into it a little bit, but I also did not want to actually write a retelling. I knew from the jump, I was like, this is not going to be a beat by beat retelling. I just kind of want to pull some of these themes in. So what I do have is a morally ambiguous mother who's Machiavellian in her own way. We have the stepfather who's kind of taken over the deceased father's land that he
Hmm.
rules, which is uh, Marco is the stepfather in this in my book, and he's kind of taken over his predecessor, who was a scientist, taken over his practice, we'll say, but he's taken it in a completely different direction. And then we have Salome, it's just a French name, like a French woman's name. If I did an actual retelling, I kind of ran into this problem where my protagonist was too smart.
Mm.
She would know. She would be like, hold up, this is exactly what I just read about on Wikipedia. So I had to make it different enough that she wouldn't put that together. But I just kind of thought, okay, first of all, with a few outliers, women don't kill people who tell them no immediately. Unfortunately, that's something that men do. You can look it up if you want to disagree with me. And maybe that's where it becomes a feminist tale.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that absolutely a feminist, and but I don't think I didn't set out to say like I'm going to write a feminist retelling of Salome at all. It just kind of ended up being a word that came up as my agent and I were thinking of ways to position this book. And it is feminist in that it gives Salome more agency. She doesn't have to die because of her lust. She speaks about her hopes and dreams with another woman, and it really, really passes the Bechdel test. So there are ways in which it is feminist, but I didn't set out to write a feminist reclamation or anything. I just kind of thought it was gross that the original femme fatale was like a teenager who, on the very first time she ever got rejected, reacted badly and then got killed for it. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
damn, that's mean.
Yeah.
Like, can
So
we not give her a little grace?
so then the difference between a retelling, would a retelling be considered
Mm.
like repeating the original story?
I would think that for it to actually be considered a retelling, I would need to follow beat by beat the plot a lot closer than what I did. I
Okay.
changed a lot because I just wanted it to deal with these themes in a broader way than for it to actually follow the plot line.
So when it comes to things like reimaginings and what you've done, how important, I mean, I guess this is a question that marketing may not want, but like how important is it to say that that is what it is, as opposed to letting it exist out there and see if people pick up on it?
I think that's a great question, and that is also a question for marketing because
Yeah.
there is a huge market for retellings. And I
Hmm.
actually just had a reviewer who wrote like readers that come to this thinking it's going to be a beat by beat retelling might be disappointed, and I couldn't agree more. But
Hmm.
hopefully they realize at some point that it's not. I try to use the word reimagining because it diverges so much from the story. I think if you wanted to map it onto the original story, it's going to have a lot of the same structure because most stories do,
Hmm.
you know.
All right, shifting gears a little bit, because your book is coming out in middle of May, and this is your first book. This is the first book that you wrote not thinking that you were going to have an audience. You wrote it for yourself, and now it's out there in front of people. And now you've got to market.
Terrifying.
It's how terrifying is it? Tell me.
Well, I have a lot to say on that. I am a very happy ghostwriter. I'm a happy editor. I'm quite introverted, and I'm not natural on camera. Like, I had a moment in my life where I enjoyed being on camera, and that is far gone. And it's very difficult for me to shift gears from being a behind the scenes person to being on screen, which I have to say that because so much marketing happens on our phones now.
Hmm.
So it's not just, long form interviews for podcasts and publications. It's really clips and sound bites and captions. And I'm realizing as I'm trying to create content to support this book, I'm really not a short form person. I speak in a lot of caveats. Frankly, I mean, just the story of this book and how long it took me to write is very long. I started it in December of 2017. And
Wow.
so
Okay.
I struggled making a timeline carousel that was under 20 images and it still didn't tell the full story. So I just don't have that gene and it's really tough. And I have some friends who are great at marketing and they have been in my corner really saying like, no, you're not asking for attention. You're not, trying to
Mm-hmm.
make this all about you. You're trying to find people who already like to read and just get them to enjoy your book.
Hmm.
And that, I don't know, I feel like it's the least natural part of this process for me. And sometimes you'll hear authors say that writing the book was the easiest part. And it is so true.
Wow.
Like writing the book is fun and yeah.
Well, I'm glad we get to have this discussion because I work in marketing, not for the book world, but I work in marketing for municipality, and I've been doing it for over 10 years now. And I remember how terrified I was at the beginning, not just being out there in any capacity, but having the weight and responsibility of representing a municipality is like terrifying. So if anything, it became like a really fast lesson on how do you handle that responsibility without going insane, without being so anxious. That one wrong move could take down a whole community's trust, And through that, I learned some like shortcuts to like just different mindsets that now as I'm setting forth on my own project that I'll talk about eventually in the future, um, I've been able to take some of the lessons I've learned in my day job to this and I could share them. I don't know if it's helpful necessarily because I think everybody has their own unique journey that they have to go through, and then there's the very specific story that you're sharing. And so basically, what it is, it's a strategy. It's a strategy. It's a public persona, and adapting a public persona almost like an outfit, like an outfit or a shield. You can wear it like a shield for a little bit if that helps, um, and and practicing enough so that it's not so we like the division between who you are as a person and the person that you are as the public persona isn't so different that you mess up and you can't figure out, easily how to slide back into one or the other. Um, I also learned this is people always talk about how they hate hearing themselves talk, listening back
Hmm.
on videos and recordings. I started using the Marco Polo app, and I'm sure there's plenty of
Me
apps.
too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I would go back and listen to my own messages that I just sent somebody. And now I can argue I have a day job where communicating is my profession. So whenever I would go back and I would listen, a lot of people won't. They do not want to go back and listen to what they say. I will because I'm like, did I articulate what I was saying? Did I like how was my tone? Could I have done that more efficiently? And just normalizing that as my everyday experience, like made talking and marketing and just the public persona so much easier. So that those are my little cheat sheet advice. But other than that, it really doesn't get better until you've been through it and been out there
Yeah.
practicing, and it's nerve-wracking. So I totally feel
That's
you.
what I keep thinking. So also Marco Polo has completely desensitized me to my own voice because
Yay.
I'll go back and listen to be like, wait, did I already tell her that before I tell my friend a 4 minute story for the second time? And so I started doing that. I don't look at myself because I'm always walking and holding the phone at a horrendous angle, but it did really help with the voice thing. So that's really interesting. And something that I'm reminding myself as I'm going into this is that the book is going to stay for sale. It's not like if I don't have a great first week, if I survive that week and then I get a little bit more confident and a little bit more confident, I can continue to sell copies.
Hmm.
I'm not trying to be on the New York Times bestseller list. Please don't be mad at me, Putnam. Thank you so much for publishing my book. Maybe next time I can try better, but I would love to, have this be a strong first novel. But at the same time, it's going to be for sale in perpetuity, as
Hmm.
far as we know, and so I don't I don't want to be the debut author that's also getting interviewed on the New York Times. And I know that a lot of people feel completely opposite to that. But I just want to live through the week and then live through the next week and then kind of slowly come out of my shell and
Okay.
continue to promote. Then we have the paperback release. So anyway, if that makes sense, I'm more of a tortoise than a hare right now.
Do you feel like you're doing this podcast episode like as a requirement and it's like you're getting out of your shell and out of your comfort zone?
It is really nice to speak to someone I know and I like
Hmm.
have like several years of rapport with. So it feels more, back and forth and not so stuffy as if I had just gotten on, with NPR books or something and I'd be like, oh my God, I really hope I sound put together. I really hope I sound like professional writer and not just me, a
Hmm.
person who's like so lucky to do this for a living. But still like I also there's an element to it in that most people's debut novel is not their first novel,
Hmm.
and I feel a little exposed. I think is the right word. Where of course, as an artist, you want to always be getting better, right? You should be getting better with every passing year and every project under your belt. I do feel a little like uh, I can see the seams of my own storytelling in this one, whereas I think my next projects will be stronger from a craft perspective. And so it does feel a little, I think exposed is the best word of sometimes you would write a novel, kind of like work out these kinks. It doesn't sell, and then you write another one and it sells, and then you sell the first one too. But then you
Hmm.
have like those years of having gotten better to go back and revise. And I did have years that I like really upped my game craft wise and I revised, but this is my first novel and my debut novel. And that's kind of, I feel really vulnerable with that.
Well, I am not surprised because I feel like even before, because I remember when we first met, you were still drafting and working on your book. You were also working on other people's books, right? And it's like you had a chance to exercise the mistakes through people like me like and recognize, oh, this is, this wasn't a good, fit for here, this plot, move it over here. And you asked so many good questions that I
Mm.
feel you essentially lived what I ended up living with my first failed manuscript. And so even though it
Mm.
is your first book, I would argue that you were like, it's not surprising though, given your circumstances,
Yeah.
that your first book got to where it
Yeah.
is.
Editing absolutely makes me a better writer. And it's a different muscle. And not every writer enjoys editing, and not every editor enjoys writing. I happen to love both, and I find them equally creative. But it was kind of interesting because I worked as a piano teacher for a couple of years, and I was so busy working all these jobs and writing and piano teaching and yoga teaching and babysitting, doing all these things that I didn't actually sit down and play the piano myself for a couple of years. But just listening to kids play The Saints Go Marching In over and over, hearing the intervals, um, matching pitches, sight reading. Like we'd flip to a song and it was like a kid's song, so it's not even like pushing my level. But then we flip the page. I'd sight read with them while they're playing it, and I'd know if they're hitting the wrong note just by reading. When I finally sat back at the piano, I was better at
Mm.
like Chopin, and I was like, I haven't practiced this in years, but I was still there is neuroscience to support this that I'm visualizing, I'm spending time in this field, in this music, the eye to ear to finger connection and all of that. And it kind of worked like fertilizer for what I was actually doing. And I really see that come through with editing too and reading. But reading, you're not necessarily reading with an editor's eye if you're not an editor,
Mm.
right? And actually, I don't recommend doing that for anyone listening who's like, oh, I should start reading with an editor's eye. If you don't want to be an editor, don't do that. It will ruin reading.
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good point. Okay, well then
Yeah.
speaking of your marketing though, you have put out, oh, what is your Instagram handle, first of all?
Leslie Baird, author.
Leslie Baird, author. Okay, so for anyone who wants to go to Leslie Baird, author on Instagram, you posted a really fun reel. So I wanted to do like a fun rapid fire because you listed certain qualities of a person that would be interested in your
Hmm.
book. And so I want to list those off back to you, and then you rapid fire tell me what does that have to do with you
You know
as a
that rapid
person.
fire is like my nightmare, but okay.
I'm sorry.
Um,
Okay.
no, it's okay.
All right, but luckily you were already familiar with this stuff because you gave the original list, so this should be easy.
Yeah.
Okay, so Francophile.
Yeah, it takes place in France. There's a lot of French words in it. I spent a lot of time in this region, so I hope that the sense of place is fairly accurate, although it is an outsider ultimately telling the story.
Okay.
Is that what I'm supposed to do right now?
Yes,
Is
yeah.
this the
Off,
rapid fire?
off the
Okay,
cuff,
okay.
like what this has to do with you. Catholic guilt.
I'm not Catholic, and I didn't even grow up very religious at all. But I somehow internalized a lot of guilt, and so I wanted to make my protagonist Catholic, and I interviewed some Catholic people to talk about their guilt, but ultimately it came from me.
Okay. Well, coming from someone with a Catholic mother, there, yeah, you got it. You got the guilt pretty well. Okay. Covers the camera on the laptop.
Oh, there are a lot of cameras and surveillance in this, from digital surveillance to tracking devices on cars to security cameras in the house. And at some point, the narrator even has like an out of body experience from which she is the camera.
Ooh, yes. Okay. Being suspicious of supplements and MLMs.
Yeah, this completely unregulated. Like it's completely unregulated. You could literally go to, don't do this. Don't be like, I heard it on Speculative Sandbox. You could go to the grocery store and buy a fatal dose of supplements or and mix
Yeah.
them and match them. And you can just go buy them at the self checkout.
Yeah.
Ah, like, yeah, it's completely unregulated. And there are supplements that are not as pure as they might say on the bottle. So it is a multi-billion dollar a year industry. And people think that just because something says natural on it means that it's safer than pharmaceuticals. And like, hey, we have lots of reasons to be suspicious of big pharma too. Like, don't get me wrong there. But you can't go to Kroger and like overdose on, a pharmaceutical that you don't have a prescription for. So yeah, and MLMs are really creepy too.
Yes.
And there's always, yeah, the money funneling up to like a charismatic figure. It's a cult.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Hmm.
Sleep paralysis demon. Have you been visited by the sleep paralysis demon?
So much.
Mhm.
I lived in a really haunted apartment in college. I went to the University of Montevallo, which is a really haunted campus in Alabama. Look it up. I'm actually planning to write a collection of ghost stories that take place on this campus someday, but I have some of them mapped out. But I lived in this creepy, like servants' quarter building. It was an apartment building cut into four apartments. And anytime I tried to take a nap, because I also like worked at a coffee shop, so I'd wake up really early and I needed to sleep in the afternoon. But I would have these horrible sleep paralysis dreams where a woman was shuffling around my bed, like praying fervently in a language I didn't understand.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
wouldn't be able to move and I'd be all hot and sweaty and trying to like break out of it and it wouldn't happen. And then finally she would scream my name really close to my ear.
Why is that such a common thing I hear from people who talk about sleep paralysis demons? There's like someone in the room with them and
Hmm.
it's like an attack. Ooh, ooh, okay, I can't wait to
Well,
read your that.
the veil is thin. Like I can actually believe that when you're in that state, the veil is really thin,
Hmm. Okay,
whatever that
my
means to you.
my favorite, morally ambiguous women in stories.
Yeah, it's so, especially like, okay, I'll say this, like in a world where cancel culture exists on the internet and like somebody can just get piled on for saying the wrong thing, like I really struggle with that. And so would my character, Courtney. Like she would really struggle to put herself out there online and be so exposed. And I think that that can make us less likely to mine the morally ambiguous female character because it's also a razor thin edge of what readers will tolerate, especially with
Hmm.
a female narrator. Of because my first draft, I tried to make Courtney as unlikable as possible, and all my readers were like, "I don't like her."
Ooh.
That doesn't mean she was necessarily like in morally ambiguous territory. Maybe I just didn't do a good job writing that. But when an author can pull off a character who's not necessarily making the best decisions, um, for instance, and I hope this isn't a spoiler, but Salome reveals that her gerontologist father had done some research that ended up um, kind of being picked up by like a eugenicist group that was like, oh, well, all of his subjects were white, and so he believes in eugenics, and he doesn't. That's what Salome says. And
Mm.
so Courtney just very, very quickly takes her word for it without doing any more research, without saying, like, I mean, according to Salome, her father did, say, hey, I made a mistake in my original sample. Like, racism in science is real and we need to look at this. But, this experiment went on for 25 years and I can't go change the original
Mm.
subjects at this
Hmm.
point. And then he died. So anyway, so Courtney's kind of she's morally ambiguous at times because she wants to follow her crush more than she wants to follow her journalistic background to follow the story and say like, okay, but let me double check her sources because my subject is extremely biased. Um, the mother that I kind of pulled from the Herodias story is very morally ambiguous. Hopefully, we think she made the right decision at the end, but she's completely committing the patriarchal bargain where she's aligning herself with a man to make her safe, and it's coming back to bite her in the ass, as it always does. That kind of thing.
I love the idea of ambiguous character morally ambiguous characters because it does require a little bit of media literacy. It requires reading between the lines and context. In today's world of rapid sound bites and tiny little, digestibles,
Yeah.
it's really hard to get ambiguity across. And the need for people to be explicitly, literally described everything. And I don't know if that is
Hmm.
the truth in how people feel or just what comes across because social media is this dumpster fire
Right.
of this.
I
So,
think it is what you're saying because, like I said, I kind of am discovering I'm a long form person. I would rather have this conversation, but yeah, you could pull a soundbite out of anything and shop it around the wrong way.
mhm.
And then there's this for the morally ambiguous Salome herself. She used to work for this think tank in France that was actually helping create far right policies. Like, uh, how do we, I think it's a great idea to, for maternity leave and to have women, because our society runs on women's unpaid labor and to pay women who are raising their children so that they have money that's coming to them that's not tied up in their male partner, if that's what they have. Um, but their angle was, well, how many generations can we do this before women don't go to college and don't seek education because they don't have to?
Yeah.
And so like that's a completely different angle to be
Hmm.
coming at than are we actually just reimbursing women for their labor? Are we incentivizing them to not get an education so that they don't compete with men?
Yeah, and it's a heavy topic. So to be
It is a
able
heavy
to
topic.
explore
Yeah.
it and people readers come into it with their pre-biases or their pre-assumptions and being able
Mm-hmm.
to get them to either challenge the way that they absorb the information or affirm, right? But being
Mm-hmm.
able, and of course, in this world, you're not going to please everybody, and you're going to get those people that
Sure.
immediately shut down. But
Mm-hmm.
I personally love the exercise of morally ambiguous characters. I even like the exercise of morally bad characters. Like just because it's to me, it's an opportunity to kind of get in the POV of something. And sometimes the most outrageous situations are educational.
Yeah, I thought that a lot with Jessica Knoll's Bright Young Women. Um, I don't know if you've read that, but I thought it was excellent. And it does talk about a murderer and but never says his name. And it really from the point of view of the women that were surrounding it. And I think she did a really, really good job. And the writing's just brilliant. So hats off to her. But a lot of people were like, why are we talking about this? Like,
Mm,
um, almost in the same vein as the Dahmer Netflix series, which I think they couldn't have been more different.
mm,
It wasn't, I didn't find it to be exploitative as a reader. And I do enjoy morally ambiguous characters and getting to read with an eye for what would I do in that situation. And um, yeah, I don't want to have to make everything so stark black and white that there's no question and there's no space for the reader to wrestle with these things.
hmm. Absolutely. Okay. I think the last one I want to ask is just because this is such an intriguing question and a good hook for your book. Do I like them or do I want to be them?
Mm-hmm. I think that's like a um, girl crush trope of like when you have a crush on another girl and you're like, wait, maybe I just want to be her. But this is like compounded by the Francophilia and looking at Salomé through a lens of wanting to be French so badly because if I were French, then all my problems would be solved, you know, and then learning that
Hmm.
that's not true at all. Um, and I don't know that goes. You could take that in a lot of different directions, but that's a way that I find Courtney to be pretty morally ambiguous because she that is kind of icky to see someone's culture and to say like, oh, maybe I just want to be French, or maybe, you know, insert whatever you want, and then there could be like a completely other element to that if it was racialized, which it isn't between these two women, but there could be fetishization in there and just having like an affinity for a culture without an affinity necessarily for that individual could be really sketchy. And it didn't necessarily get all the way there with Courtney, but I did want people to be like, hmm, do you like her? And then her
Mm.
friend Kylie in Paris says, oh, you probably just like her because she's French. And that
Okay.
kind of like cuts to the quick where Courtney's like, oh, do I really like her because she's French? Ew.
I love that there's a bravery, I think, to being able to explore characters like this that have traits that could be perceived as unsavory by some. Especially
Mm-hmm.
because that's gonna, that'll lead to conversations and maybe even like it always happens, linking back to you, the author, right? Oh, your characters think this. Does that mean you, the author, thinks this?
I
And
know that's so tough to wrestle with.
but it's at the end of the day, it's like, are we writing strictly as morality plays to embody this perfection, that can't really be reached? Or are we writing to exercise what it is to be human? And we are fundamentally flawed. We all have
Mm-hmm.
something interesting going on about us. Um,
Right.
what is the saying? Like he without sin cast the first stone. I can't remember if that's the actual
Yeah.
something like that. Um, so I love that. I think if anything too, if we're talking marketing, it gets conversation going.
Right.
So
Exactly. Well,
yes.
and I can attest, like, Courtney and I have a lot of the same personality traits, mostly the neuroticism. I learned from my beta readers that I was really neurotic. I didn't actually know that going in. but it attracts people to be like, oh, I love her. Like she spells on her fingers. That's so neurotic. And I was like,
You're like,
oh.
that's normal. Like, what are you talking
Yeah, I was
about?
like, like, what do you mean? I'm always spelling on my fingers. But like, I've also never had a crush on a French person. So, there's like lots of things about us. I wasn't raised Catholic. My parents aren't divorced. There's so many things that she comes from a different place than I do, and there are very clear demarcations in my mind of what is hers and what is mine. But if you're writing at all, you have to come up with it
Yeah,
to write it.
it's got to come somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah,
All
but
right.
nobody wants to read a flattened, perfect person.
No, that's not what makes conversation, right? So,
Right,
and I think
right.
we ultimately all read books and consume media because we want something to entertain and we all love to talk about it. So,
I
all
hope it's
right.
entertaining for someone.
It was for me. Leslie, that was pretty much all my questions I have for you. Do you have anything else you'd like to leave our listeners with for your book? Salome, let me hold it up again.
I do have one thing I would love to tell you. So, this is my personal marketing because I love to have conversations with people and I love to meet face to face or like this over the screen and have a long form conversation. If you choose Salome for your book club, I will come to it. And you don't
Ooh.
have to have a minimum number of purchases or anything. Everybody can get it from the library. You can read it on Audible, which it's going to be amazing because I'm super, super happy with the narrator that they chose, Imani Jade Powers. She also narrated the Jessica Knoll book I brought up earlier, Bright Young Women. So, and she's bilingual and her French is amazing. So I'm very excited about that. And you can get that on audiobook. And I will come. Just email me at leslieBairdAuthor@gmail.com. I hope that this comes back to bite me. I do live in Europe, so it'll be middle of the night for me, but that's fine because what I want to do is have a conversation with you and get to know the people who read my book, enjoyed it or didn't. But I don't want to talk about it in Instagram DMs. I want to talk about it like this.
Excellent. I'll let you know what I'll let the local bookstore here, Stacks Book Club, if they choose to do it as a book club, I'll let them know that you'd be willing
Okay,
to
that'd be
chat because I
great.
think that'll be really fun. All right. Leslie, thank you again so much coming on here for your second time. It's been great chatting with you and hope to do it again in the near future. And for our listeners, thanks again for tuning in. I'm so thankful for all of you that have been following us for the years. So yeah, and if anyone wants to hear more from Leslie, check out, I think it's episode 2. It could be episode 2. It's somewhere within the first 4. We talked about immortality. So you can kind of
And I
follow
did
her.
talk about this book
You
in
did.
that episode.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. And
long
immortality
before it was, yeah,
is in there. All right,
yeah.
cool. Well, all right. Thanks, everybody.